They were the quotes heard around the world, and unprecedented at that. A Supreme Court justice highly critical of a presidential candidate in public. Here's some of what Ruth Bader Ginsburg, nominated to the bench by Bill Clinton, had to say about presumptive Republican nominee Donald Trump. At first, I thought it was funny to think that there's a possibility he could be president. He's a faker. He has no consistency about him. He says whatever comes into his head at the moment. He really has an ego. Trump fired back on Twitter, of course, saying Justice Ginsburg of the U.S. Supreme Court has embarrassed all by making very dumb political statements about me. Her mind is shot. Resign. Ranking Republicans like House Speaker Paul Ryan also condemned Ginsburg.
For someone on the Supreme Court who is going to be calling balls and strikes in the future based upon whatever the next president in Congress does, that strikes me as inherently biased and out of the realm.
But today, Ginsburg released this statement. On reflection, my recent remarks in response to press inquiries were ill-advised, and I regret making them. Judges should avoid commenting on a candidate for public office in the future. I'll be more circumspect. We're wading into some new and pretty choppy waters here on a day that the New York Times poll says the race is tied at 40%. Helping sort it all out are two of our best legal minds, former federal judge, supporter of Hillary Clinton, and FOBG, friend of Bader Ginsburg, Nancy Gertner. Judge, it's good to see you.
Nice to see
and
you.
Michael Sullivan, who served as U.S. Attorney here during George W. Bush's presidency. Michael, it's good to see you, too. Trump and the New York Times editorial page agreed, almost unheard of, that your friend crossed the line and then some. They're right, aren't they?
Yes. Yes,
that she did cross the line?
Yes.
Oh, really?
I think that it's a complicated situation in that the canons of ethics, the formal rules, really don't apply to the Supreme Court.
Which is ridiculous.
Right, but that doesn't mean that it was a good thing to do.
So what does she do? I mean, this may sound ridiculous, but, well, that's a hard way to start a question. Tom Brady.
This may sound ridiculous.
Have you heard of Tom Brady?
Yes.
Tom Brady may seek a stay of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals decision.
Right.
He and Donald Trump you're a pretty fierce lawyer in your former and current life.
Right.
If you were representing Tom Brady, wouldn't you ask her to recuse herself in the case? Why not?
Because because that doesn't bleed into everything that she would possibly do.
What if there was a
about
Bush
the
v.
case.
Gore Part 2?
Well, I mean, she wouldn't recuse. You could ask to recuse her, but just as, for example, when Cheney and Scalia went duck hunting, it said something about their relationship. It said something about his proclivities, but nobody could get him to recuse himself.
You didn't answer my question, though. Should she not recuse herself if there was a comparable case?
She should not, because they never do. Going forward, we should look at this again.
So I assume you agree with her here. I was really surprised, I must say. Do you agree with her?
I do. Judge Gertner, I agree. That Justice Ginsburg actually crossed the line.
Scalia crossed the line, too, in the example she picked. There was this energy case that was pending before the Supreme Court, and the two of them go duck hunting. I mean, that really is pretty incredible.
It raises the eyebrows of not just people in the legal profession, but the general public when something like this happens. This has been unheard of in terms of a justice of the United States Supreme Court weighing in on presidential politics. Now, notwithstanding the fact that I'm sure they all have kind of their own, political positions that sometimes are reflected in terms of policy.
But you didn't answer. Scalia crossed the line too, didn't he?
Well, I don't know if he did. I mean, he had a personal relationship with the vice president prior to this happening.
Yeah.
And it was a continuing relationship, no different than I think a federal district court judge that may have a relationship with a lawyer and spending some time.
One of the things about this, in a time when partisan politics is really poisonous and divided, I really think there's something very good about the Supreme Court tempering their positions in the way that they do. So I think it's a legitimacy issue, not a should she legally recuse herself, because there are no rules.
Well, and now I want to talk about the no rules. I didn't know about it till this week. The U.S. Code of Conduct for U.S. Judges, which applied to you.
That's right.
Can't make a speech that opposes or endorses a candidate.
Right.
How absurd is it that the most important judges, with all due respect, justices in the country, you are really important, but I mean the SCOTUS, how absurd is it? It's like when Congress doesn't apply rules that apply to all of America to themselves.
There's no question about it. The question is how one would enforce it. You'd have to come up with some blue ribbon panel, because another judge couldn't sit in judgment on the Supreme Court. But I think that there are ways of doing it. I think that it should be done. I think they should be subject to the same rules.
You voting for Trump?
But
you voting for Trump?
Well, I will be voting for Donald Trump.
Okay, let's move. I want to get to this for a second, if I can.
Well, I just want to comment though. For the last couple hundred years, we didn't need this rule for the United States Supreme Court justices because they didn't weigh in. It's sad to think we now need a rule to essentially monitor the behavior of the United States Supreme Court justices.
Actually, that's not completely true. There have been Supreme Court justices that ran for office from the Supreme Court. This is 100 years ago. I mean, that was actually
Well,
not
let's say within the last 100 years.
Right.
Okay, so
Okay.
let's get back to Trump in this whole race for a second. My estimation, I bet you're in the same class. The most important thing to determine a vote, I would argue, come November, who are they going to pick for the Supreme Court of the United States? I want to talk to you about an issue I discussed with Associate Justice Breyer, a local kid, I'm sure a friend of yours too, a couple of months ago when he was here. Here's Justice Breyer.
I would say there should be a long tenure. Whether it's a term of years or not, maybe it would be better to have a term of years, but it must be long because you don't want a person in that job thinking about his next job.
And I should have said what my question was. Shouldn't we term limit justices so that, I mean, for example, if Trump or Clinton picks a 50-year-old, he or she can be there through 8 presidents of the United States. Should we term limit justices at the Supreme Court?
Well, I've been a supporter of electing judges, so I think term limiting justices, I think would make some sense. 10
Like
or 20
Supreme
years.
Court justices too, or judges locally?
Well, local judges.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Was nervous there for a second. You might
Right,
argue a case
right.
sometime. How about you, term limit him?
I'm ambivalent. I mean, you want me to say something? I'm ambivalent. On the one hand, it does take some time to get into the job. The idea is that this was an institution that, in fact, would outlast any particular presidency.
How long were you there?
17 years.
Were you any good 10 years in?
I was fabulous.
So,
What are you
so
talking
the
about?
reality is, so give him a 20-year term. That's
Yeah,
fine, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not sure what I think about that because, on the other hand, there have been fabulous people in other states. For example, Margie Marshall, who was forced to retire at 70, when she clearly had all her marbles and could have contributed. So I'm torn about that.
Let's get back to are you an enthusiastic Trump supporter or she's better than Hillary Clinton supporter? It's a ladder, right?
I'm voting for the Republicans.
Okay, fine. Mike Pence, apparently, former member of Congress, 5 or 6 terms, obviously governor of Indiana, pretty important kind of state, Rust Belt, which could be pivotal here, apparently is going to join the ticket tomorrow at 11. Isn't 100%, but that's what all the sources are saying. Is that a huge asset to Donald Trump's candidacy?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
You had a preference?
All my preferences weren't necessarily on the short list.
Like who? Give me one.
Well, I like Marco Rubio. I thought Marco Rubio is the next generation in terms of Republicans. I thought he would have done a phenomenal job as a presidential candidate. I like the governor of Ohio, John Kasich, as well.
He may not even be going to the convention.
I thought they brought some good balance in terms of the tickets.
So you're ambivalent. I know you're not exactly a Trump supporter.
I was voting for Gingrich because I thought between Gingrich and Trump they had 6 wives. I thought that was an interesting concept.
Thank you very much. Pence does help, though, does it not? John King did a really interesting thing last night on CNN. Well, if all the states that were Obama and Romney stayed where they were, it's another landslide for Clinton. However, if Florida, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, all of which Trump is either leading by a little or in a dead heat, if they were to swing just those 3, everything else stayed the same, Trump would be the next president of the United States. Pence helps with places like Pennsylvania and Ohio. Does he not?
He doesn't. He has a terrible rating with respect to the LGBT community. There was this kerfuffle last year when he signed a religious freedom act that essentially enabled, some would say.
But then he reversed himself.
So
isn't that what you want?
Well, no, but the notion is that he then lost the religious right and in addition is not trusted by progressives. So it's not clear that he can deliver his state. Who knows?
Let's stay in presidential politics for the final minute or so. You're a former prosecutor in your other life. James Comey make the right recommendation to the Department of Justice on Hillary Clinton in those emails? 56% of Americans think she should have been charged. Was he right or no?
Well, I'm not sure he fairly described whether or not there was sufficient evidence to charge her, and that's really my trouble with regards to Director Comey's comments. I think there is sufficient evidence, to charge. The question is whether or not, there's a federal interest in charging, and I'm not sure that Jim Comey essentially kind of clarified that point. I think there's no question she broke the law. The question is whether or not it should warrant federal charges.
Is he right?
Not remotely.
Why?
There's no criminal intent. The cases that others have brought up are cases like Petraeus, who passed on secrets.
Well, that was voluntary.
Well, he wrote stuff down and gave it to his lover. This was all within the State Department. Everybody in the State Department knew about it. There was no criminal intent. It was dumb, but there was no criminal intent. That is exactly the kind of call he should make.
But when he contradicted a multitude of factual statements she had made in the past, only one device, well, there were multiple devices. We gave him all our emails.
Right,
No,
right,
you
right.
didn't give us
Right,
thousands.
right.
No classified. There were 110
But
classified.
even-
Doesn't that help you determine that there may be intent if you're cooking the books a little bit?
Intent to do what? She sent emails to others in the State Department. If she sent the emails to you, Jim, that would be a different issue. There was no question that this was sort of inattention. There was no question that it was careless. But this is not a leak. These are statutes that are dealing with leaks.
You have 10 seconds.
Well, I'd say that the mishandling of the classified information, I think, is clear. The fact that she may have transferred it to other people is not protected under the statute. I think she violated the statute. The question whether or not she should be charged, I think, is a different
We gotta live
question.
there. 6 wives will like that. Nancy Gertner, Judge, pleasure to see you. Michael Sullivan,
Thanks, Jim.
great to see you as always.